I never thought the dress I poured my soul into would become a weapon, not against me, but against the people who betrayed me. Last spring, I spent 3 months sewing a wedding gown for my daughter, Elise. Every stitch carried a memory, every bead a silent prayer for her happiness. But when the day came to see her wear it, she looked at me and laughed. She said it looked cheap. Her future mother-in-law agreed, calling it embarrassing. They didn't know I was standing in the next room when they mocked me. And they definitely didn't know I wasn't done with them. My name is Helen Ward. I'm 60, a retired art teacher in a small coastal town where the ocean is as much a companion as any neighbor. My husband, Peter, passed away 5 years ago, leaving me with a house full of memories and a garden that still blooms with the roses he planted. Elise is my only child, the heart I carried outside my body for 30 years. We used to be inseparable, baking cookies in the winter, painting seascapes by the shore in the summer, giggling late into the night over tea and watercolor brushes. After college, Elise moved to the city. She met Daniel, a polished lawyer from an influential family, and slowly, our calls became less frequent. At first, I told myself it was natural. She had a life to build, a career, new responsibilities. But even during holidays, there was something distant. Her laughter felt practiced. Our conversations skimmed the surface, avoiding the deep waters we once swam in so effortlessly. Still, when she called to announce her engagement, I felt that familiar rush of joy. I told her I would make her wedding gown, a tradition passed down from my mother and grandmother. She hesitated for a heartbeat, then smiled politely, her eyes not quite meeting mine. There was no spark, no excitement. I pushed the doubt aside, chalking it up to stress. Weddings were overwhelming, after all. I poured myself into the project. I ordered silk from Italy, lace from France, and spent every afternoon in my little sunroom overlooking the sea, the fabric catching the golden light as the waves whispered against the shore. I stitched each bead with the care only a mother's hands could give, imagining Elise gliding down the aisle, Daniel's eyes filling with admiration, the guests murmuring at her beauty. With every stitch, I tried to close the invisible gap between us. I thought about the little girl who used to run into my arms, the teenager who shared her every secret, the young woman who once promised, "No matter where I go, Mom, I'll always need you." But something gnawed at me. Elise canceled 2 weekend visits to try on the dress, saying she was too busy. When she did come, Daniel stayed in the car, scrolling on his phone. And when she tried the gown on, she stood stiffly, her reflection unreadable. I told myself it didn't matter. Love, I believed, was enough to bridge any distance. I was wrong. I didn't cry on the drive home. Not yet. My hand stayed steady on the wheel, but my chest felt hollow, like the air had been sucked out of me. The dress lay on the seat beside me, its delicate lace catching the last strands of sunlight, a cruel reminder of months spent sewing each stitch with love. When I got home, I placed it carefully on the dress form in my sunroom. It looked as beautiful as the day I started it, but now it seemed orphaned. I sat in my sewing chair and stared until my eyes blurred. In the days that followed, I waited for a call from Elise. An apology. A visit. Something. Instead, my phone stayed silent, except for a polite text about returning the silk scraps in case I could use them for future projects. Future projects. As if this dress was nothing more than a hobby gone wrong. A week later, I received an invitation in the mail, not from Elise, but from Amanda. Gold-embossed lettering on thick cardstock. You are cordially invited to the wedding of Elise Ward and Daniel Carter. There was no mention of me making the gown. Curiosity, or perhaps masochism, made me attend the final fitting at a boutique Amanda had chosen. The dress Elise wore was sleek, modern, and soulless. No lace. No warmth. Nothing of me in it. She barely looked in my direction as the seamstress fussed over her. As I left, I heard Amanda's voice drifting from behind a curtain. Now she'll know her place. We can't have her thinking she belongs in our circles. Elise didn't object. That night, I took the original gown down from its stand. My fingers traced the embroidery, tiny waves and seashells along the hem, a nod to our summers by the shore. Memories flooded in, her small hands covered in flour as we baked cookies, the way she used to run into my arms after school, breathless and smiling. But those days were gone. She had chosen her place in Daniel's world, and it didn't include me. I folded the dress slowly, placed it in a cedar chest, and locked it away. Not because I wanted to preserve it, but because I couldn't bear to see it anymore. I told myself I was done with heartbreak. But deep down, I knew this was only the beginning. Mariah's eyes sparkled as she turned the gown over in her hands, letting the light play across the silk. Helen, I'm serious. This belongs on a runway, not in a cedar chest. People would pay thousands for something like this. Her words weren't flattery. I could hear the certainty in her voice. And yet, there it sat, rejected, dismissed as quaint. When she told me about Leah, her cousin, the pieces began to shift in my mind. Leah's wedding was only 3 weeks away, in a modest community hall. No designer gown, no family fortune, just a woman in love, trying to make the day special despite everything working against her. I know it's a lot to ask, Mariah said cautiously, but if you lent her the gown, she'd treat it like treasure. She doesn't have much, Helen. Not even a dress that fits. I hesitated, not because I doubted Leah's worthiness, but because a deeper, sharper thought had begun to take root. What if this dress, the very one Amanda and Elise had deemed unworthy, became the centerpiece of a wedding everyone talked about? What if the photos, the admiration, the whispers, all circled back to them? Not kindness alone. Justice. I'll give it to Leah, I said slowly, but on one condition: we document everything. Photos, video, social media posts. Every stitch of it needs to be seen. Mariah's lips curled into a knowing smile. You're planning something. I'm ensuring it's remembered, I corrected. The next day, I pulled the gown out of the cedar chest. My hands didn't tremble this time. Instead, I felt a deliberate calm, like a surgeon preparing for an operation. I checked each seam, reinforced the hidden stitching, and added a few final embellishments, delicate pearl droplets along the neckline. Details Elise had once called too sentimental. Mariah arranged for Leah to come over that weekend. When Leah saw the dress, she covered her mouth, tears spilling instantly. I can't accept something this beautiful, she whispered. You can, I told her. And you will. But there's one thing you need to know. This dress has a story. When you walk down that aisle, you won't just be a bride. You'll be proof that beauty and worth don't belong to the highest bidder. Over the next 2 weeks, preparations became meticulous. Mariah contacted a friend who was a wedding photographer. I reached out to a local florist to arrange wildflower bouquets that matched the gown's seafoam lace. Leah's friend, a videographer, agreed to film the ceremony and reception, all for free once they heard the story. By the time we were done, it wasn't just a wedding we were planning. It was a statement. A quiet, devastating statement aimed straight at Amanda and Elisa's polished little world. And I would make sure they saw every moment of it. Leah stood in front of the mirror, her hand trembling as it traced the gown's delicate lace. I've never worn anything this beautiful, she whispered, her voice breaking. Her little boy peeked in from the doorway, grinning from ear to ear. Mom, you look like a princess. Mariah recorded every second, the shimmer of the Italian silk under the sunlight, the way the gown seemed to breathe with Leah's every movement. The footage wasn't staged. It was pure, unfiltered joy. We uploaded it with a single line. Love should never come with a price tag. Within 48 hours, it exploded across the internet. Local news outlets ran the story. Fashion bloggers dissected the craftsmanship, calling it the most heartfelt gown of the year. Strangers sent messages from across the country, praising Leah's glow and asking about the dress's origins. And I knew exactly who else had seen it. Elise called on the third day. Her voice was sugar-sweet but carried an edge. "Mom, I didn't realize you had this kind of talent. Maybe we could collaborate for the wedding." I let her finish her little pitch, then answered with steady calm. "The gown has found a new home, one that truly values it." There was a pause, just long enough for me to imagine her jaw tightening. "Oh, well, that's fine, I guess." But it wasn't fine. Not for her. Not for Amanda. The week before Elise's wedding, a reporter from the city's most watched morning show reached out. She wanted to do a live segment about my unexpected viral success. I agreed, on one non-negotiable condition. The segment had to air at the exact same time as Elise's lavish society wedding special, which was set to be broadcast live. The producers loved the drama. I didn't tell them why it mattered to me. I just smiled. When the day came, I sat in the studio under bright lights, the gown displayed on a mannequin beside me. The cameras rolled, and I spoke from the heart. I told the story of how the dress was made, the months of hand-sewn details, the meaning behind every stitch. I never mentioned names, but I wove in just enough hints. A wealthy family who wanted something more sophisticated, a daughter who had once been my world. The audience didn't need me to say it outright. By the time I left the studio, my phone was buzzing. A friend texted a screenshot of the wedding live stream's live chat. It was flooded with comments. "Is this the family that rejected the gown? Talk about bad taste." They couldn't see real beauty if it slapped them in the face. Reporters outside the venue were already asking Elise and Amanda for their thoughts. And judging by the stiff smiles in the broadcast footage, neither handled it gracefully. The message had landed, not with screaming or scenes, but with something far more potent, truth dressed in silk and lace, seen by thousands. Amanda's meticulously curated image crumbled faster than anyone could have imagined. Overnight, whispers turned into headlines. Local newspapers ran side-by-side spreads, Elise's extravagant ballroom wedding on one page, and Leah's modest but radiant community hall celebration on the other. The contrast was brutal. Sponsors for Daniel's upcoming charity gala began to quietly withdraw, not wanting to be associated with elitist attitudes toward artisans. Fashion bloggers dissected Amanda's comments, calling them tone-deaf and out of touch. And the kicker? Elise's wedding coverage, which was supposed to be a society event, became a PR disaster. Every time her televised ceremony aired, the live chat exploded with remarks like, "She turned down that dress?" and "Imagine choosing status over soul." Viewers were openly comparing her glittering but lifeless gown to Leah's, which seemed to have its own heartbeat under the twinkling lights. Meanwhile, Leah's wedding video, her laughing as she twirled in my gown beneath strings of fairy lights, was shared thousands of times. Strangers from across the country sent messages saying the dress had restored their faith in love. A few days after the wedding, the bell above my shop door chimed. Elise stood there, perfectly styled as always, though her eyes betrayed the strain. She didn't look around, didn't comment on the designs displayed. Instead, she went straight to the point. "Helen," she began, her voice tight, "could you tone down the publicity? It's starting to affect my brand." I let the silence stretch just long enough for her to squirm. Then I smiled, not warmly, but with the kind of calm that comes when you've already won. "Sweetheart," I said softly, "this was never about you. It's about the dress finding the right bride." Her lips pressed into a thin line. She opened her mouth to argue, but must have realized there was nothing she could say that wouldn't make her look worse. Without another word, she turned and walked out. The gown stayed with Leah, of course. She sent me a thank you note a week later, with a photo of her and her son, both beaming. The dress looked even more alive in that picture than it had on the day I finished it. As for me, my phone hasn't stopped ringing. But this time, it's not with gossip or shallow requests. These are calls from people who value the craft, who see a gown not just as fabric and thread, but as a story stitched with heart. I didn't just make a dress. I made a point. And in the end, that point stitched itself into the very seams of my name, a name that now stands for something more than skill. It stands for dignity, for respect, and for the truth that beauty doesn't bow to status. It's been 8 months. What was once a small sewing corner in my living room is now Ward and Thread Atelier, a bright, airy studio on Main Street, with bolts of fabric stacked like candy and sunlight pouring over every work table. There's a 6-month waiting list for custom gowns, and the phone rings so often that Mariah jokes we need a receptionist just to manage the inquiries. She works beside me now, her energy and humor making every day lighter. Leah still stops by sometimes, wearing the gown for anniversary photo shoots or charity events. Each time, she hugs me like we're family. Watching her spin in that dress, free from any price tag or strings attached, reminds me why I started sewing in the first place, not for status, but for joy. As for Elise, our relationship has shifted into something civil but distant. We exchange polite texts on holidays. No more forced dinners where I try to win her approval, no more tiptoeing around her moods. I've stopped auditioning for her affection, and let me tell you, that is its own kind of freedom. Amanda, from what I hear, has retreated from the spotlight after the wedding debacle. Sponsors didn't come back, and the gala she once bragged about is now run by someone else. I didn't set out to ruin her reputation. But greed, when given enough rope, tends to hang itself. Sometimes I think about how close I came to giving that gown away quietly, without a fight. If Mariah hadn't knocked on my door that day, maybe none of this would have happened. The dress would have gone to someone who didn't care, and I would have been left with nothing but regret. Instead, we told the story. We let the world see the beauty that was being ignored. And that's the thing about revenge. It doesn't always need to be loud or cruel. It can be soft, subtle. It can be a silk gown draped over the shoulders of the right bride, photographed under fairy lights, while the wrong people watch from the sidelines, realizing they'll never touch something like it again. I didn't just get justice. I got my life back. And now, every stitch I sew feels like a small, quiet victory. This isn't just a story about a dress. It's about knowing your worth, even when the people closest to you don't. We teach others how to treat us, and sometimes, the best revenge is building something they can't take from you. Have you ever been underestimated or betrayed by someone you love? Share your story in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe for more real-life tales where truth and justice finally catch up.